Alright, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and I'm coming to y'all with episode 4 of the Washington Football Team 2021 review. This is the best free agent signings, ranked from best to worst, and of course, money is going to be a large factor in this. Of course, production and everything that you did this season matters a lot. That's the majority of it, but money is also a big factor as well. If two players played just as well and were just as productive, regardless of position, but one made way more money than the other one, then the one making more money is going to be ranked lower, of course. And also, if you haven't, make sure you check out the previous 3 episodes of the Washington Football Team review. Episode 1 was where we finished in all of the NFL power rankings, all of the final ones from ESPN, Bleacher Report, all of those guys. Episode 2 was ranking the rookies from worst to best from this 2021 past draft class, similar to what we're doing today, but instead of money being a big factor, where they were drafted was a big factor. And then episode 3, the most recent one before this one, was the craziest 2021 stats and final rankings, all of the advanced stats, how many yards per game we had, how many yards per game we allowed, offense, defense, individual, a lot of next gen stats, again, advanced statistics that dive into like any records that we broke this season, and all of the statistics dive into everything. Points per play, first down, third down efficiency, who led the team in snaps on offense, defense, and special teams each. I compare quarterbacks with the statistics that matter most, especially like pressures and accuracy. I compare the DBs as well, the defensive linemen, linebackers, and safeties as far as missed tackle percentages, all receiving targets, anybody that caught a pass, and any runner, including quarterbacks like Taylor Heineke. I compare all of the runners as far as tackles broken per attempt, all of that type of stuff. So make sure y'all go check out that video, man. That's a really big deep dive into the Washington Football Team 2021 season. That's my favorite video of the 4, and I'm also planning to take the majority of those statistics and comparing them to how we finished the previous year, and to look at our ranks as far as that goes as well, because we finished mid-20s in a lot of statistics. How did we finish last year? I know defensively we did way better, but offensively I'm pretty sure we actually made a little bit of progress this past season with Taylor Heineke versus the chaos that we dealt with in 2020. So I'm gonna compare all of those statistics as well. Offense, defense, individual, where we ranked especially. And that's probably going to be episode 5. But remember, today, right now, we're on episode 4, and I will be ranking the best free agency signings from this past 2021 free agency class, ranked from best to worst. And before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get a notification immediately. And every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, like I already said, make sure you check out the rest of the 2021 review episodes. And then following that, I'm going to have an entire big breakdown, long video about why the Washington Football Team needs to prioritize quarterback this upcoming offseason. And then after that, I'm gonna start my quarterback series where I break down each potential quarterback that we may target, whether it be through free agency, trade, or draft. And I'm gonna break down why or why not we should get any of these guys. And as far as free agents go, I'm gonna talk about how much money they may cost, because that's gonna be a big factor, and the cap hits and all of that type of stuff. When it comes to trade, not only are we gonna have to talk about money, but we're gonna have to talk about what we have to give up to get them, like draft picks, players. And then for drafts, I'm gonna talk about where they may potentially get drafted, like what round will we have to trade up, or can we just trade back and get them, or can we even get them a later round? So stay tuned for my quarterback series. I'm literally gonna go quarterback by quarterback, all of the big names, and if I have enough time, I'll even get to some of the lesser known names, like the Marcus Mariotas as far as free agency goes, or like the Bailey Zapps in the draft. But the priority is to get all of the top names done, like free agency wise, Aaron Rodgers, trade wise, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, and of course draft wise, Malik Willis, Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett, Sam Howell, and all of those guys. So definitely stay tuned for that series as well. That's upcoming after I finish the Washington Football Team 2021 review series. The next episode, the 5th one, where I compare our 2021 final stats and rankings to our 2020 stats and rankings, that may be the final episode of the 2021 review. We'll see, but it'll definitely temporarily be the final episode, and we'll move right into the quarterback series right after that. And without further ado, man, let's get it. Alright, so the top two, for me, you can pick or choose. I feel like you can have these in any order that you want to, but the top two are non-negotiable. For me, I have number one, wide receiver Deandre Carter, only making $1 million per year with this current contract that we signed him on. I mean, the fact that he's a Pro Bowl alternate as a return specialist, and he made plays a receiver. He went 3 consecutive games with a receiving touchdown. He had that one really hurtful drop against the Cowboys when we were making that comeback. Kyle Allen threw a perfect dot deep down the field, which is what a lot of our receivers were waiting for to get from Taylor Heineke all season, and they weren't really getting it. Deandre Carter finally got an opportunity from Kyle Allen. Didn't make the most of it, but other than that, man, he was great in the return game, especially. I mean, again, he's Pro Bowl alternate. When it was just the votes from the people, from the fans, he was the Pro Bowl return specialist. But after coaches and players voted, he became an alternate. He's still quite likely to actually make the Pro Bowl and play in it, but we'll see. And again, I factor in money. And the fact that he's making only $1 million per year when we signed him is huge. I really hope we re-sign him. I'm going to do a video on which free agents we should re-sign, why and why not, and also how much money they will cost as well. So be on the lookout for that video. And then number two, I have left tackles Charles Leno. And this is based on 2021. The money that he was making 2021, the contract that he signed in the 2021 free agency. So even though he's making more money now and we signed him long term, when we signed him, he was only making $4 million per year. And to find a arguably franchise left tackle playing at a level that's right below Pro Bowl, definitely a staple left tackle, which is huge for us. Also huge for Samuel Cosmi, because we drafted him to be just a great franchise tackle. And with Charles Leno here for at least the next 3 years, Samuel Cosmi can focus on staying at the right tackle instead of flip-flopping back and forth, which will hinder his development. So that helps Samuel Cosmi. That's going to help whatever quarterback comes in here. And again, he was only making $4 million this year and played very well. And also on top of all of that, the best ability is availability. And Charles Leno is king of that. He hasn't missed a start in like over 6 seasons dating back to his time with the Bears. So to have a guy, especially as hurt as our team gets, especially our offensive line specifically this last year, Charles Leno was the only guy, him and Eric Flowers, and even Eric Flowers missed a little bit more time than Charles Leno did. Charles Leno literally led our team in offensive snaps, and it wasn't even really close who was in second place. And so to have that as your starting left tackle, again, he's not the greatest, but you got to be smart with money. Trent Williams out here making quarterback money, of course he's better than Charles Leno. But with the money that Charles Leno is making, and to take that difference in money and apply it to another position on your team, overall, I feel like that makes you a better team. So I love the contract that Charles Leno just got. Again, he's number two based on the fact that he was only making $4 million this past year. Again, everything in these rankings are based on what they did in 2021. We're not looking at Charles Leno's next contract, even though, even with that, he'd still probably be at least top 3. But $4 million for what we got from him last year is great. And he had a larger impact than Deandre Carter, but again, you can flip-flop these 1 or 2 either way. I just feel like Deandre Carter was number 1 just because he was literally making $1 million. And he was essentially like our wide receiver 2 for a nice portion of the season, which is not what we brought him in here to exactly be. I mean, he barely made the 53-man roster. For him to end up being wide receiver 2 due to injuries and De'Ami Brown not emerging, Adam Humphries was dependable on third downs, but that was really about it. And Dax Milne had some flashes, but it was really just Terry McLaurin, big gap, and then Deandre Carter as really your wide receiver 2 this season, which isn't a great thing, but that's how it was. Number 3, you have kicker Joey Sly. I mean, he made $400,000 this season. And then the fact that he has definitely shown potential to be our franchise kicker is huge. He made every kick this season, even some 45-yarders and plus, and he only missed 1 PAT, and that was the one that got blocked, and then he tried to go make a tackle and ended up injuring himself. They got the touchdown anyway, so it was pointless, and that's when we ended up signing Brian Johnson for a little while. But Joey Sly, for him to come in mid-season like that and never miss a kick, and again, the only PAT he missed was the one that got blocked. He looks like a potential franchise kicker at $400,000. That value is insane. Had to put him number 3 for sure. Next up, you have quarterback Taylor Heineke, only making $2.3 million per year for the contract that he signed in the 2021 offseason. Not a franchise guy, but he made the 2021 season special, and most importantly, fun. At the end of the day, sports is supposed to be fun. You want to win, but at the end of the day, Taylor Heineke made this past season a season I'll never forget. You know me, man. The fact that he went and beat the Falcons is all I needed for me to be eternally grateful for everything he did for this franchise. Even though we play the Falcons next year, again, back-to-back seasons for the first time maybe in ever in our franchise's history, we normally only play them once every 4 years. So beating the Falcons is really big to me. First of all, it's the team I hate the most. And then usually, it's quite rare that we play them. We're not in the same division. So Taylor Heineke beating them, especially before the next year's schedule came out. I mean, I was really excited. I thought I had bragging rights for the next 4 years, but at least I had them for at least a year. So, hey, man, Taylor Heineke, appreciate the roller coaster ride. Again, you're not a franchise guy, especially not a long-term option, but you were great for what we wanted in 2021 to make this season memorable. With all of the injuries and the COVID-19 and our defense having a large regression, you made this season watchable. I feel like without Taylor Heineke, especially after Ryan Fitzpatrick got hurt, if it were just Kyle Allen and all of the other guys that ended up playing like Garrett Gilbert as our only quarterbacks, you just delete Taylor Heineke from the season, it wouldn't have been very watchable. And I definitely feel like we win less games. 7-10 is nothing to be proud of, but at least it was a fun ride. And I appreciate Taylor Heineke for it. And the fact that, he was a starting quarterback in the NFL for the majority of the season, only making $2.3 million per year. That's a huge signing right there. Again, we only won 7 games, but it could be worse. There's a lot of teams out here only winning 2, 3, 4, 5 games. Then number 5, William Jackson. Now, this is the first big money signing. This is the only big money signing for a long time on this list. He's making $13.5 million annually with the contract that he signed the 2021 offseason. And he looked pretty good the first game. He had the interception against the Chargers. Then he regressed and he just looked lost. But then after coming back from that bye week, the second half of the season, he looked almost worthy of that contract. That's still quite a bit of money. But, I mean, he looked like he actually earned it the second half of the season. And I'm excited about his future with this team. Del Rio finally stopped putting them in zone coverage all of the time. He's a man cover corner. He let him man cover. And as you notice, he was rarely thrown towards the second half of the season. It was just Kendall Fuller and Danny Johnson, all of those guys getting targeted all of the time. William Jackson was rarely getting targeted because he was just locking up one side of the field. Go look at the film. He literally would just take a receiver out of the play and quarterbacks were just forced to throw it the other way, and that's literally what we brought him here to be. Sad that it took an entire half of the season for him to get comfortable in this defense and for Jack Del Rio to learn how to use them, but I'm excited about the fact that they finally figured it out. It was a little too late as far as the season went, but it makes me very optimistic about how he'll look in this defense moving forward for sure. The number 6, Bobby Mccain, making $1.5 million annual value. Not the best safety doing it, but also not the worst. As the season went on, he got better, even though he still wasn't great. And I'm a little upset about those interceptions he got against Jake Fromm against the Giants that last game of the season, because now he's going to bring that up in contract negotiations. And I would like to re-sign him, but I'm only willing to sign him for very, very cheap because I don't love Bobby McCain. I don't hate him as much as a lot of the Washington football team fan base does. And I still definitely want to go get a safety in free agency. I mean, pay Marcus Williams whatever money he wants to be your franchise free safety. Go and draft one high in the draft, maybe like second round, like a Daxton Hill from Michigan. Or if we already have our quarterback situation figured out in the offseason, say we get like a Aaron Rodgers somehow or whatever, you may want to trade up for a Kyle Hamilton. Like, that's how big I am on getting a franchise free safety. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Bobby McCain doesn't have a place on this roster, at least as a backup or depth, or whenever we run like cover 3, cover 4, you can have him out there. I think he's pretty straight. He's not terrible. And again, only making $1.5 million this season as a starting free safety that made some plays. He made some mistakes as well, especially early in the season. But going on, he became a little bit more solid, a little bit more dependable. Again, only making $1.5 million per year. I think that's pretty good. That's why he's 6th on my list. Moving on to 7th, we have wide receiver Adam Humphries for $1.2 million per year. And he's literally just here for the third down conversions. I mean, whenever Taylor Heineke needed to find somebody for a third down, it was Logan Thomas at times. It eventually became John Bates, but sprinkled all throughout the season, it was usually Adam Humphries. If it wasn't Terry McLaurin, it was Adam Humphries, and I really appreciated him for that, man. He had sure hands. Other than times that he just tripped on his own for no reason, he was usually open when you needed him to be on third down as well. So I like Adam Humphries. If he's willing to re-sign for a very, very cheap contract, because I like what what I saw from Dax Milne. He could easily be an Adam Humphries replacement potentially, especially for cheaper, but we'll see. I like Adam Humphries, and again, this is based on what he did for 2021 and how much money he made in 2021, and only making $1.2 million. That's worthy of being the 7th best free agency signing we had this year. That's not great, and that shows you how this class wasn't the greatest. Of course, it's not a great class. The fact that Adam Humphries was 7th, but it's still pretty solid. Then number 8, even though this is technically a draft pick, he was also technically a free agent that was signed. I have running back undrafted free agent Jaret Patterson, only making $800K this year. And based off of just talent and potential, he could easily be top 5, but he didn't play enough to go above the guys before him. And again, this is based on solely what you did in 2021. I don't want to put too much potential in this, because then you have to also calculate potential money. I want to isolate this to how much they were getting paid 2021 and what they did 2021. But to me, he looked great out there at the end of the season. Whenever Antonio Gibson needed a break, whenever he was hurt, or after he fumbled and he got benched, Jaret Patterson came in and filled in quite nicely. His vision is really good. He's not the most athletic guy. He's pretty small, so that's why he's like a high floor, low ceiling guy, which is really a good 1-2 punch with Antonio Gibson, because Antonio Gibson is the guy with the lower floor but a very high ceiling just because of his versatility and athleticism. So if you want to bring in a guy that has some surefire vision, that's your Jaret Patterson. But of course, Antonio Gibson is your potential franchise running back that you're trying to groom to gain the same vision that Jaret Patterson already has, because if he can, and if he can stop fumbling, he can be one of the best running backs in the NFL. I'm not sure if Antonio Gibson will ever be a 20 to 30 carry a game guy, just because it seems like his body can't hold up for that. But I like the future of this franchise as far as Jaret Patterson. If we re-sign J.D. McKissic, please do, and Antonio Gibson, and maybe you bring in a guy that can be like the bowling ball, the bruiser, to take some weight off of Antonio Gibson. But again, I liked what I saw from Jaret Patterson this season. He came in and filled in for Antonio Gibson at times quite nicely. Technically, J.D. McKissic as well in the passing game at times too. Then number 9, you have cornerback Danny Johnson, only making $1 million this season, and he contributed quite a bit to this defense. I mean, that turnaround of the defense, the second half of the season defense going against actually pretty good quarterbacks too. It's not like last season, the 2020 season, where we pretty much played no good offenses, no good quarterbacks. The second half of the season, even when our defense finally figured things out, it's not because we went against lesser talented quarterbacks. The defense just honestly played better, and Danny Johnson was part of that. After Benjamin St-Juste had his concussion injury scare, whatever, seemed like he just kind of got redshirted after he was dealing with a concussion injury for several weeks. It seems like they just sat him down. Danny Johnson was pretty much our starting slot corner, and he played pretty nicely. I mean, the fact that you just don't even remember him being on the field, that's a good thing. When you forget a corner is out there, when you don't hear his name called, that's a good thing. So Danny Johnson held it down pretty well for us in the slot. And again, he was only making $1 million. Then number 10, you have linebacker David Mayo, only making $1 million, and he played fairly well against the run when we need him to, especially later in the season when Jamin Davis was getting way less snaps. And then David Mayo also contributed pretty heavily in special teams. Now, of course, he's terrible in coverage, but there was a reason that he was getting more snaps than Jamin Davis towards the last couple of games when we were trying to save our season. And again, if nothing else, he's a great special teams contributor, only making $1 million. And that's really the point that we're at in this list. We're the cheap guys that contributed something. Number 11, you have linebacker Norris making $1.1 million. He's basically here just for special teams. Number 12, you have kicker Brian Johnson, $200,000 for stepping up for the short time that we needed him. He came in very clutch for us, way better than Chris Blewett and even better than Dustin Hopkins. So really appreciate Brian Johnson, again only making $200,000. Then number 13, you have center Tyler Larson making $1 million, and he was a nice backup for a short amount of time. We lost Chase Roulier, then it was Tyler Larson. We had Wes Schweitzer at times, then Wes Schweitzer got hurt, so we had to bring back Tyler Larson to start at center for us. And it really only collapsed once we had Keith Ishmael starting at center. You never really missed Chase Roulier until Keith Ishmael was starting, so that lets you know that Tyler Larson did his thing. He wasn't as good as Chase Roulier, but he filled in and didn't make it obvious that Chase Roulier was missing, like Keith Ishmael did when he had to start the last couple of games this season. Then 14, you have cornerback Daryl Roberts making $1.6 million. It didn't contribute much, but only $1.6 million, you can't be mad at that. Then tight end Samus Reyes, number 15. Remember, he wasn't drafted. We just signed him out of nowhere. He was only making $800K. And at this point, I mean, he's on this list just for what he showed in the preseason. He only played 39 regular season snaps. But since he was never thrown to, I'm assuming he at least blocked fairly well if we just didn't notice him on the field. If we're not screaming, why is Sammis Reyes on the field right now? That means when he was in the game, he had to block pretty well. So I'm gonna have to go back and look at the film to truly see what Sammis Reyes contributed this season, because he definitely, again, was not thrown to. But if he played 39 regular season snaps, he had to have been in there for run blocking snaps, the vast majority of those. And again, if we didn't hear his name called, if we weren't screaming at the TV, that means he did his job well. Then 16, you have tight end Nick Guggamos, making only $700,000 per year. Never played, but only cost less than $1 million. Then defensive end Justice Reed, same thing. Never played, only cost us less than $1 million. And that goes for 16 all the way through 23. Again, number 16 is Nick Guggamos. 17, defensive end Justice Reed. 18, tackle Najee Turan. 19, defensive tackle Gabe Wright. 20, safety Landon Stevens. 21, tackle David Sharp. 22, running back Lamar Miller. And 23, linebacker Joe Walker. All these guys were making somewhere in the range of $700,000 to $1.2 million this season. That's why they have to be on the list, because we signed them, but they barely played. But at the same time, they weren't making much money to where it really hurt us. And then, of course, there were also guys like Dion Yelder and Bo Benchwile, who was even less worthy to even be on this list because they barely even stayed on the team long at all. So they're also kind of in this as well. Then you have 24, kicker Chris Blewett, and this is easily our worst signing as far as production, especially out of the cheap guys. I mean, he only made $100K, but he was selling, so he had to be on this list somewhere. He's 24th. The only guys worse than him, you have wide receiver Curtis Samuel making $11.5 million, and the only reason he's above Ryan Fitzpatrick is because he played 84 snaps. Ryan Fitzpatrick is, of course, 26th, dead last, making $10 million per year. I mean, just ate that up. Of course, he got hurt, and it wasn't necessarily his fault, but he only played 16 snaps, and then he was at the Buffalo Bills game in the crowd happy like he just ran off with a bag from the Washington football team, like they paid me to be here to be a Bills fan this evening. So he had to be dead last. And again, Curtis Samuel, the money that he's making, those two had to be dead last. Chris Blewett is not dead last only because Curtis Samuel and Ryan Fitzpatrick were making that much money. So yeah, man, just to recap, the top three, I have wide receiver Deandre Carter. Number 2, I have left tackle Charles Leno. And number 3, I have kicker Joey Sly. And 4th, Taylor Heineke. 5th, William Jackson. Again, not a great free agency class, but you know, it's straight. We found some guys that we could potentially end up really liking in the future. We hit home runs in special teams. Deandre Carter as a returner, and also as a fairly dependable receiver and deep threat, and a potential franchise kicker in Joey Sly. Those are huge. We even have a backup franchise kicker option in Brian Johnson. So we hit huge in this free agency class as far as special teams goes. Even like David Mayo and Jared Norris as special teams contributors. And then you also found your franchise left tackle for cheap, gave him a 1-year cheap prove-it deal. He went out there and proved it, and now we re-signed him long term. And then, of course, Taylor Heineke gave us one of the most memorable seasons since I've been alive. And then William Jackson, we have a potential shutdown corner finally. At least the first half of the season was ugly, but the second half was actually really good. And then Bobby McCain, ideally he's your backup free safety. But if he has to start for us again next year, which I hope doesn't happen, that isn't terrible, especially if he's only making very cheap money. Then Adam Humphries is your safety blanket. If we re-sign him, dependable on third downs, almost always open, almost always catches was thrown towards him. So those are big, man. We made some important signings. Again, not a great class, not a flashy class, but we found some sleepers in this class for sure. And as far as the future of this franchise, again, we hit home runs in special teams, and we found a potential franchise left tackle, potential franchise kicker, potential franchise returner, and a potential franchise almost shutdown corner in William Jackson. Those are pretty big. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. What order would you put our free agency signings in? Do you agree with my list? What do you disagree with? Where would you switch people out at? Would you have Ryan Fitzpatrick dead last, Curtis Samuel right above him, and Chris Blewett right above him? And as always, man, I appreciate all of the support, man. Shouts out to everybody that donates to the streams. Again, just to keep y'all updated, I will be live streaming the Senior Bowl, and before that, I will be live streaming my reaction to the new name, logo, jerseys, all of that. So definitely stay tuned for all of that, man. The live streams are coming, and as always, man, I appreciate all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose name you see scrolling on the screen right now. Man, I really appreciate y'all. I'll catch y'all later. I'm out.